Wow, welcome. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, I see. And I have a special guest today, April Hutchinson. And if you haven't heard about her, she's a Canadian powerlifter who's been advocating for women's rights as well as women fair sports for women in Canada. And she's been faced a little bit with some controversy, but I don't think she's controversial. But the media has sure tried to paint her as that, as well as the organization in the province that she worked in. She got suspended. We're going to talk a little bit about that. She's going to share her story, basically her life story, and how she became someone who speaks up for women and fairness in sports. I do have a video to play for you guys before we bring her on. April shared it with me. And I'll share with you guys the tweet that she did first with the video, and then I'll play the video, and then we'll bring her up on the screen. So here it is here. I'm just going to move this over. She says, it's been a crazy rise of ups and downs, and it's been so worth it. This is why we speak up. So many changes happen from changing the International Powerlifting Federation policy, which now somewhat protects women's in sports, to Alberta's newly formed legislation. Speaking up works, and I will keep speaking up until women and children are protected in Canada. 2025 will be a year for more political changes. Please join me. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the States. We'll probably be covering as well some of the new changes that President Trump announced yesterday during the inauguration. We'll have a discussion with April about that. But anyway, she says, Happy New Year. Thanks to everyone who has supported me. So we're just going to go ahead and play. Oh, just give me a second. I just realized it's not going to work properly. There. I've got to bring it up on the screen here. There you go. I don't know how to get April to not be on the screen yet, but we're going to be bringing her up shortly. So here you go.
It's International Women's Day. Hooray! Unfortunately, it no longer means anything.
For those of you who don't know, April Hutchinson is the Team Canada powerlifter, currently serving a 1-year suspension from competition handed down by the Canadian Powerlifting Union for speaking out against a biological male athlete, Anne Andres, who is currently lifting in the women's class.
Well, Team Canada powerlifter April Hutchinson joins me now. Well, welcome to Piers Morning Says. Thank you for coming into the studio.
Hey everyone, I'm Megan Kelly. Welcome to the Megan Kelly Show.
Back to Uncensored with me, Rosanna Lockwood.
I'd like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast.
Feel good about myself if I was a male taking female records and podium spots? No.
Your sport looked at you, an actual woman, and said because you correctly called Anne a biological male, you were suspended from your sport and you remain suspended to this day?
Anne's been actually the one harassing people. Like, I don't know if you saw the clip from back last March, making fun of women in their bench press and how weak we are.
We have that.
The whole year, they just disciplined me and threatened me with discipline. But yet Anne can actually make threats towards me. He made threats last week towards Premier Daniel Smith, like literally death threats. And if you want to talk about violence, like just look around.
Now, April Hutchinson is a competitive powerlifter. She's now speaking up, claiming it's unfair to biological women, and she's even been threatened with a ban from her sport for expressing her views.
Most recently, I've been threatened with suspension. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from my federation stating that you cannot call Anne a biological male. That goes against the code of ethics. Because in their
male to female trans athlete who holds the women's record in Canada, appearing to mock women for being weak.
Please welcome the Queen of Crunch, the Duchess of Destruction, the Princess of Pulverization, Canada's real-life bona fide version of Power Girl, Miss April Hutchinson.
Well, I do have an attorney that's in the works right now. I do have to respond to their letter of disciplinary, but it is in the works, yes. And I'm actually raising money right now for legal fees to pay them. No, little did he know that getting me into sports would actually save my life later on. And my 76-year-old father's here today. So I want to thank you.
Hope to achieve. What would you like to see happen within the next few months?
Well, you know what? My main goal, even if I wasn't powerlifting, my main goal is to have fairness for women in sports around the world globally.
And by the way, whoever needs to hear it, Anna's a man. Anne's a man. It's biological. He's a man. I don't care what he does to himself. He's a man trying to compete wrongfully and unfairly in women's sport. Get out, Anne. Get out.
As a whole can be loving. I'm a very empathetic, loving person. But guess what? There's boundaries.
Announcement by the province to prevent biological males from identifying as female for the purposes of athletic competition.
We are the majority. I hate to say it, but I'm glad to say it. We are the majority because we believe in common sense. We believe in science. We believe in truth and facts, right?
Tomorrow, I have a meeting with Daniel Smith's advisor, which is exciting because I've been working with them with the new legislation with sports coming out. So yeah, it's a busy 2 days.
And finally, what would the members opposite say to April Hutchinson, who has been marginalized, who has been called every name in the book, all because she stood for what she believed was right? What did the members say to her? Would they look her in the eye and tell her that she's wrong? And Madam Speaker, they cannot.
Honourable members, the division has been called. Third reading of Bill 27, Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. All those in favor of third reading, please rise.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 47, total against 33.
Motion is carried and so ordered.
Wow. Wow. I'm going to bring April up here. I'm just trying to find the right screen. There you go, April. You are a Canadian hero and a hero for women and for fighting this fight. Like you, I know what it's like when you stand up for something and they send everything at you, all the rabid dogs at you. They do everything to cancel you. And you face so much of that, but you did not stop. You kept pushing ahead. So with that, I'm going to start with the first question. With what happened yesterday in the US, what are your thoughts and feelings about that today? And what are you hoping to see in Canada happen following the big news out of the US?
Yeah, well, I think, along with a lot of Canadians, I think I was telling you today that I wore my my mega hat today to Costco. And my fiance and I had a bet. I said, how many positive reactions do you think you'll get from people at Costco and how many negatives? And I said, I think I'll have a lot of positive reactions. And as soon as I walked in the door, the first reaction I got was, I love your hat. So I actually had nothing, it's like the silent majority thing, right? I said, I had nothing but people commend me on wearing my hat because it just takes one person to wear this hoodie that, or this hat, because too many people are afraid to actually do that, right? And everyone's kind of having the same feeling, right? That we need a change. It's just like people here in Canada, we need desperately a change of government. And what happened yesterday, I watched the whole inauguration. I was glued to the TV and I was like, this is what needs to happen in Canada. And I pray to God that, whether it was, a change of immigration or just watching Trump sign that declaration of there's only two genders, I use the word two sexes. I don't like using the word genders, but there's only two sexes. I hope with our new government coming in this year that that same thing's going to happen. First, I hope that Bill C-16 is repealed, and then let's get on board with the same type of thing that's happening in the States, right? We need to have females and little girls protected, and that's going to happen with getting rid of Bill C-16. So, and that will be a trickling effect, and our sports will have to be protected, our spaces, our bathrooms, our prisons. Pierre has already stated many times that men don't belong in women's washrooms, prisons, and sports. So I do believe that if elected, or if he's in power, that he will do the same.
Yeah, we need that to happen now rather than later. But I think seeing what's happening in the US is definitely going to have an influence in Canada, because you're seeing the momentum, you're seeing the people rise up, you're seeing the what used to be a silent majority not be so silent anymore. And it's funny, you made a really good point when you said when you went to Costco, sometimes it just takes that one person to be bold and say something, or be bold and wear something, and then you'll start seeing other people become more bold and saying this isn't right? So thank you for doing that, and I wish more people would have that I guess courage to do that, exactly that.
Yeah, and I said that all along. Like when I go around and I do my speeches, like I'm going out to Edmonton next month to talk with Theo Fleury, and I say at the end of my speeches, and I said, to fathers, because I always say, there's a lack of men that stick up for their daughters. When you hear about these cases where men are going into locker rooms with little girls, and I said, like, do you think CTV or CBC are going to cover a nightly story about men locking arms and banding together and standing in front of a locker room saying, no, you can't go into that locker room, or kick a man out of that locker room? Saying, like, I know I asked my fiance, I said, what would you do if a man went into a locker room after your little daughter? He said, I'd tell them to get the F out of there, and I'd kick them out myself. And I said, yeah, CBC is not going to do a story on that. They're not going to cover that. And so I said, what's wrong with these men that are too afraid to defend their daughters and protect them? So I said, it takes a trickling effect. It takes one bold person, or just doing the right thing and protecting, because everyone's too afraid to put their hands up and go, oh, well, this is a woman's problem to deal with, or, this is a woman's issue. And they're just too afraid to put their, to stand up. And like I said, me wearing my sweatshirts, I wear them all around my city, and I get nothing but high fives. People are like, well, where can I get one? It's just, people are afraid. It's just, but more people are coming out now, so
where can someone get the sweatshirt or a shirt like you're wearing? Do you have a website where you sell them, or?
Yeah, so I'm constantly, I don't like to plug too much, because
well, I'm giving you that plug. I wasn't planning on it, but I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, I don't
more of that.
Yeah, I have a couple, I have my website. So yeah, if people are interested, this is just one of them, but I have my website, which is just my name, www.aprilhutchinson.com. And yeah, there you can buy, we have a whole bunch of different hoodies, like different colors, different styles. There's one that says Stay Women's Sports and Spaces. We have ball caps. We have actually really cool, like, camouflage ball caps, t-shirts for the summertime. There's tank tops. So it's like, it doesn't matter what season you're in. We also have like adult human female with the 2 X's tank tops, which I love wearing those. There's a whole bunch of goodies on there. There's stickers, there's bumper stickers, you name it. So if you just go on and look throughout, there's mugs, anything you want on there. So if you're too afraid to use your voice, literally just go on there. And I don't make money from my merchandise, and I tell people this all the time. All the proceeds go towards my advocacy. So every time I travel around or travel anywhere, it literally goes towards, like, my flight costs. It goes towards, the money goes right back into my website. So It's not about money making. It's about spreading the message and getting the word out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We even did that ourselves with our organization. We had merch, "We Stand for All," during
Yeah.
COVID because there was a group of people that were treated unfairly, and that's how we started as an organization. So, but I completely understand that. Now, what I would love my listeners to hear is how you got into this situation, or I don't even want to call this a situation, but you have a very powerful story. If you're willing to share it, I would love to hear the full version of it. I know I heard a little bit of it, but I would love to hear the full version. And I'm sure my listeners too, because sometimes when people fight, you don't quite understand why they fight, and it gives it more weight when you hear their stories. So are you willing to share yours right now?
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
sure. I would love people to get to know me because I think a lot of people just kind of see me as like, oh, she's an athlete that just, I mean, they judge me just from seeing me on Twitter, and they don't know I have so many different layers to why I do fight. And guess what? I don't even have kids. I don't have daughters. So so yeah, my story has a whole bunch of different layers to it. So I actually started off like I played sports at a very young age. I started off when I was 5 years old. I grew up, my father's a retired police officer. He, bless his heart, he got me in sports when I was 5. Played every sport you can imagine. And at a very young age, I was actually sexually abused by my neighbor. And the reason why I tell people that, because it has a lot to do with who I am as a person today. And when I was sexually abused by my neighbor for a length of probably a year and a half, after that happened, I actually wanted to become, so I had an older brother. I have an older brother. His name is James, who I'm very close to. But he played sports as well. But after I got abused, I wanted to become like a little boy after. And so, and I always thought, well, I wanted to be a little boy because I had an older brother, but I wanted to become a little boy because I just didn't want to be touched again by men. And so I thought, my little 5-year-old brain was like, well, how can I protect myself so I don't get sexually abused again? So I kind of molded myself. I had the little boy haircut. I wore boy clothing. I literally, like, if you took me now, I would be basically identifying as a little boy. That's who I would be. So I think about it and I thought, well, now this is why I'm so against like these puberty blockers, transitions and stuff like that. And that's why I say like I'm not against it. I mean, I'm just against it as kids. I'm saying like when you're 18 and you're an adult, go for it if that's the decision you want to make. But as a kid, I think too many kids suffer sexual trauma. They come from bad environments and this and that. So, but anyways, after my sexual abuse had happened, I really didn't know how to deal with it. Thank God I did have sports. But when I was 12 years old, and I did come from a little bit of an alcoholic home, my father being a police officer dealt with a lot of stress with his job. I did see booze a lot in the home environment. So when I was 12, I actually started drinking myself. And by the time I was 18, I actually turned into a full-fledged alcoholic. So I can remember coming home when I was 18 and drinking like 2 to 3 bottles of wine before my parents even came home from work. And I already done 2 bottles and I thought, oh, wow, that's not normal. That's kind of when I knew I had a problem. So I think I entered my first rehab by the time I was 21, I think. And so, but I still continued on. I still played sports. I kind of brushed it off as no big deal. So I basically spent my whole life as a functioning alcoholic. I had really good jobs. I think I worked a lot of decent jobs, like with the government. Like I got in, I actually worked 2 or 3 government jobs, did really well in sports, always played, I did MMA. I was always the team captain of my basketball team, excelled in everything I did. And now it wasn't until I was about in my late 30s, early 40s that my doctor basically said, look at, I was starting to get very ill. that she basically said, if you keep drinking the way you are, you're probably gonna die within 3 years. Now, at that time, I didn't see the signs. My skin was getting very gray. My liver enzymes were through the roof. Like, my body was pretty much shutting down. I was sick every day. And so I myself, I couldn't find any type of cure for my alcoholism. I had tried to stop on my own. My boyfriend at the time left me because he couldn't deal with my drinking anymore. So I mean, at that time too, I lost my mother to cancer. I really felt very much alone. So I actually ended up, at that time, my only decision at that time was to take my own life. So I actually overdosed on alcohol and pills. And when I woke up in the ICU unit on a breathing tube, obviously I survived. I basically decided, like, I had two choices. I could either live or I could die. And that was, that was basically all I could think about when I woke up in the ICU unit. And I decided to put myself into rehab. And now keep in mind, this isn't too long ago. This was in 2019. So think about it.
Wow.
Right before COVID came along. So I came out of rehab in September of 2019. And when I came out, I just knew I had to survive. I had to keep being sober, right? Or else I knew that I would die. So I found a gym and I was like, hey, I'm gonna try powerlifting. And so I actually trained in my friend's gym garage because the gyms closed down for COVID.
Wow.
And so I trained every day for 2 hours, just trained and trained and trained. And then everything got canceled because there was no competitions. And I just remember thinking, oh, I really wish there was a competition because but I was just getting strong. And I was just like, and I remember my coach just kept saying, just keep training, April, just keep going. So during this time, I became friends online with a lot of people because that's all you had was online friends, right? So I became friends with this person by the name of Anne. And at that time, I thought Anne was a woman because Anne identified as a woman. And I would help Anne with like powerlifting techniques, and we would chit chat back and forth. And Anne always referred to themselves as a she boy, and I just automatically assumed that Anne was just like a
tomboy.
maybe a tomboy.
Yeah.
Short hair, just kind of butchy looking female. So very nice. I was actually, I was friends with Anne. And so one day we were talking about the Olympics, and that's back when Laura Hubbard went from New Zealand. And obviously we all know Laura Hubbard was a man. And I was like, wow, I can't believe they're letting men go into the women's category in the Olympics. I'm like, that's so wrong. And Anne's like, well, I'm a man, don't you? And I said, well, no. I said, how was I supposed to know you're a man? You've always been telling me that you're a woman, and you've been competing in the women's category. Plus, you've been taking gold medal for a couple of years now. And keep in mind, Anne was also competing against some of my friends, and my friends had no idea that Anne was a man. So I said, well, how far do you expect to go? Like, are you going to nationals? Are you wanting to go to worlds? And Anne's like, well, I'd like to go as far as I can. And I said, Anne, if you keep competing, like, I'm not going to shut up about it. I'm going to speak up. And Anne blocked and deleted me. Like, I wasn't able to talk to Anne any further. So I was like really upset by that. And I just kind of sat with it for a little while. I didn't say anything like right away. But then I thought, no, I have to say something. So I didn't say anything to the organization, but I started posting stuff on my social media. And I contacted Riley Gaines because I knew that she was speaking out in the States. And I started talking to her, and I started talking to icons and Marcy Smith. And I started talking to like Martina Navratilova and a lot of like the people that are very outspoken in the States, because like nothing was happening in Canada. It just wasn't happening in Canada at all. And so I started doing like posts on my social media like save women's sports, and I actually got a letter from my powerlifting organization saying, oh, you can't post stuff like that, that's hate speech. And I was like, what? Like, and then I'd say stuff like keep men out of women's sports, and they're like, you can't say that, April. And I was like, I'm not saying anything about anyone in particular, I'm just like, that's my right to say that. Like, so then I wrote them a letter, a 2-page letter to my president, and I said, well, there's a male competing, identifying as a female, and this person has been taking gold medals, and this is harmful to females. Not only is he sharing our locker room, but it's also detrimental to our mental health, and that's also creating, like, we're in a tested federation. Like, so I don't know if you know, like, I was always tested, like, we're tested for performance enhancing drugs, so we can't take steroids. But you're just going to let this male waltz in to our organization. So I probably put like many reasons why it damages our mental health, but physically, like, it's going to put pressure on us to overtrain just so we can try to beat this male. And which, by the way, I'll let your viewers know, this male is now #1 in the world for the women's category in the Masters division. And he also holds 3 out of the 5 records in the province of Alberta currently right now. And those records will never be broken by a female. And he still holds those records in Alberta. Even though the legislation has changed in Alberta, those records are still held by him. So,
wow.
But anyways, so I got that one warning, and then I think it was the year before I got suspended, but I went on the Pierce Morgan show because Anne basically broke all those records I just told you about at the regionals. And I went on Pierce Morgan and I referred to Anne as a biological male on TV. And they basically sent me the letter that said, you are suspended for 2 years because you referred to him as a male, and it goes against their code of ethics. Like, you can't refer. Now, like, I wasn't shocked by it, but like a 2-year suspension is pretty harsh. And I was basically going up against a very biased powerlifting federation. Like, one of the members on the board basically has I think it was a queer daughter. Like, I don't know if she was trans or not. So, like, I mean, I was fighting a board that basically just didn't like me in the beginning, didn't like me opening up my mouth about the situation. So I was going to lose anyways. I do think if they did this now, I think they wouldn't do the same actions that they did, but so, and that's it. But I mean, before that, I was doing really well. Like, I was going to North Americans, I was winning gold medals. I have the North American deadlift record. I was winning gold in any competition I was in. And they were drug testing me, which was funny, and and I was passing. So it was just like,
wow.
And the thing is, this person, Anne, is now suspended himself because he actually made death threats towards myself and Daniel Smith. Like, we had to call the cops on him, but he went through 2 years of making threats and making fun of women, 2 years of making public posts about me, other lifters, getting away with all of this. And all I did was literally fight for fairness in my sport and advocate for a separate category. And I literally got banned for 2 years just for calling out a male in the female category, but yet he got to get away, like I said on the Megyn Kelly show, for making death threats, and he got 6 months suspension for basically wishing the death upon myself and Daniel Smith. So that just goes to show the 2-tier, like the hierarchy of, when we talk about trans rights, how they are always like, oh, we're just, like someone said to me the other day, how dare, like they were so marginalized and they're just treated terribly. Like who are the violent ones here? Who are the ones that go after people's livelihoods and like scream bloody murder, right? Like honestly, and I have nothing against transgender anyone. Like I actually have a friend who like, we actually had transgender individuals at Alberta legislation standing with us, supporting Bill 29 that actually said, hey, we don't think men should be in women's sports either. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, it's funny they want to paint a picture that like they'll say trans rights is human rights. But the fact is I have an issue with that because when your right or your human right affects someone else and takes away someone else's human right, that's not a human right anymore.
no, that's
And
discrimination.
it
That's,
is. And
yeah.
the reality of it is men physically have an advantage over women when it comes to physical strength for the most part, and that's why we have two categories of sports, is so that
Yeah.
women can get their chance at competing. And when you take that away, and it's very much one-sided, you don't have females competing in the males category. No, you only have males competing in the female category, because we know the other way around they wouldn't stand a chance. So it's yeah, they want to forget about women's rights to begin with. It's not, they're trying to say it's part of women's rights, but it's not. And the reality of it is 99% of the population is on the same page as us, especially when it comes to this. And but then you have a few radical activists that join boards like the one you were a part of, and that's what we end up with. So you were very heavily involved with Danielle Smith and policy that was passed in Alberta. So do you want to share a bit how you got involved in that and what this all meant for changes, and kind of share with our viewers exactly what she passed with it? What did you say? It's Bill C-26? What was it?
The Bill 29 is the
29. Sorry.
Fairness, Women's Sports Act for women and girls. So that was specifically the bill that I was fighting for, which is to protect women and girls in sports. So what that entails is basically now, and I think very generous, very, very generous, because I don't think the states is going to be as generous as Danielle Smith in Alberta is, because the states this passed, or they're going to pass, because it just went to it's going to the Senate in the states. It passed in the House, going to the Senate, because they just passed something in the states, right, from JK up to college, where I think it's just going to be male, female. That's it. There's not going to be a third category. And I actually wish the Canada was like on board with that. But in Alberta, it's basically a female only category, male only category, and then a co-ed category. And so basically, to compete in the female only category, you just have to, if someone questions it, or if you want to compete in the female only category, if someone gets questioned, so say if someone goes in, now the only bad part is about this is that, say if there's a woman, or, I'm sure some trans activists are going to try to be bullies, or they're going to try to, like, say if a woman goes in there with like short hair or looks kind of butchy, they're probably going to say, oh, well, are you sure that's a woman? We should question her. And you have to provide your birth registration, right, to show that you were born female, right, at birth. That's the proof that you're going to have to show, right? Now, and then basically people born male have to go into the male only, and then the co-ed is basically just going to be like an open category. So, which I think would be called the third category, or the third category. But what they should just have is it's always been just a female only category, and then just have open, which would be everyone else. Like, I just don't know why they're kind of like, we're happy about the bill, but it's better than what it was. But I really just think that it should just be female only and open. You know,
Mhm.
people have tried to do this. Remember when I think it was Swim Canada tried to make a third category for trans individuals, and no one showed up. It
Yeah.
has been done, and they weren't happy about it because they couldn't dominate. They're not going to be number
Yeah.
one. It's no fun for them. So
Yeah.
same with in cycling or where you can take prize money, they can't dominate and take the prize money. So but no, it's better. It's a step in the right direction for sure. But
I do have what was announced by Trump in the executive order here. I'm just going to put it quickly on the screen if you're okay with that.
mhm.
Here, give me 1 second. I've got to find the right one. Here you go. So this is if you go on a website, you can find that. It'll be at, I think it's whitehouse.org. But I'll read, I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read some of it. The erasure of sex in language and policy has corrosive impact, not just on women, but on the validity of the entire American system. And clear and accurate language and policies that recognize women are biologically female and men are biologically male. Policy and definition, it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental, incontrovertible, I don't know how to say that word, reality. And then there's a few other things here. Sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. Women or women, and girls and girl shall mean adult, juvenile, human, female, respectively. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that it produces at large. Gender I'm just reading the highlight points. Gender ideology is internally inconsistent in that it diminishes sex as an identifiable or useful category, but nevertheless maintains that it is possible for a person to be born in the wrong sex body. There's one thing I want to talk about too that I've kind of noticed is we saw that during the election. There was a biological male competing in the female category for boxing. And there was a lot of controversy that he was born a female, but the fact is his chromosomes are not XX, they're XY. He has testicles, but because I won't even go into the details, because of certain analogy, they've deemed him a female. So do you think that's going to be addressed with these new policies, or do you think that there's still some work to be done to kind of protect that from happening?
So you're talking about Khalif, the boxer.
Yeah.
So, and again, and I love the people that get into this whole like, oh, he's got DSD, he's got 46XY DSD, and then he's got a micro penis and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, I feel so bad for people that bring up the chromosomal disorders thing, because they bring it up as a distraction.
Yeah.
They love to use this, because I've been on panels before where doctors, first of all, I'm not even a doctor, but they'll throw that question out at me, and I'll be like, whoa, okay, I'm not a doctor. So that's a question better suited for, say, Dr. Linda Blade, who's my sidekick, and I'm just like, at the end of the day, if you have a chromosomal disorder or not, you're still born with either XX or XY. So he had a micropenis. He was born with XY chromosomes. That's all you need to know. And at the end of the day, guess what, people? Guess what's going to solve all this? Put it to rest. And what Khalif could have done was just do a simple cheek swab test.
Yeah.
And you know what's suspicious is that he wouldn't do a cheek swab test, and he wasn't going to show his results. If you're so adamant about that you're a female, then just show your lab results. You know what I mean? Why was he threatening to sue this person, sue that person, blah blah blah? Just show the results then. What was the big deal? Where's the disclosure? So you know what I mean? But anyways, it's already that's a long time. I mean, and again with the whole like the IOC and everything, putting everything on each individual federation for them to decide, the policies. That's, again, they just had to bring back the cheek swab tests and we wouldn't have this confusion within the Olympics anyways, right? But
So do you know if anything's been done about it since last Olympics, like in the ones coming? Has there been changes, or are we still going to be facing the same situation? Like, is there anything we should be advocating for, lobbying for changes, or do you maybe that's going to change with the US thing, because the Olympics supposed to be in California, if I'm not mistaken, next, right?
well, California of all states.
Yeah.
No, well, I wasn't surprised with the Paris Olympics, the way it all went down, put it that way, because of who the leader is. But no, I don't think that. So the thing is, right now, I don't believe the president has changed with the IOC. I do know, actually, I think Dr. Linda Blay did tell me that they are working on having the policies changed. They are advocating to bring the cheek swab test back for the Olympics.
Okay.
Currently, right now, as it stands, from what I do know, is that the IOC is still putting, like, each sporting federation are the ones that make up their policy, right? So the IOC basically, how the whole boxing thing happened was that as long as the passport of that person says whatever their sex is, then that's it. That's their word. So Khalif rolled up and his passport said female. Then they're like, okay, cool, then you're female. That was it. That's the IOC's, that's their ruling, right? It's on the boxing federation. That's for them. So each sporting federation is different, whatever their policy is. So no, I agree with you. Things have to change. And that's what I just know, I don't know who it is, I don't know if they're doing work in the UK or where they're doing it, but I know a bunch of the women's groups are working on trying to get the cheek swab test back.
Okay.
Don't know why they took it away. I think it was in 2020 or in Sydney. That was the last time they did it, was the cheek swab test. That's probably the best way. That's the only foolproof way that you're going to solve things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw too, I'm just going to point out to devil's advocate, I saw during the Olympics, there was a lot of athletes who are women who may have more like male features or like tomboy features, or do you think there's a way of addressing that too, so that those who are female with those more like male dominant features don't get targeted with hatred? Because there was one, I can't remember what category was. Everyone was saying, see, this is another male. I guess if they do the cheek swab thing, everyone will know. So there will be no accusation, no targeting. But have you faced that yourself, or do you think there's another way we can address that issue too? Because I remember that athlete crying. She was kind of brokenhearted by the way people were treating her. So.
Oh, are you talking? Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's hard. I mean, some people are just mean, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. So it's weird because but it's funny. Sometimes you can just you can blame this whole trans. Since this whole trans thing started, like I blame that because I say to my boyfriend all the time, I've always been a tall, broad-shouldered, athletic girl. I've always had a very defined jaw, right? I modeled like professionally for I don't know how long, for 10 years. But guess what? Photographers loved my jawline. Some of them hated it, right? But a lot of them loved it. They're like, oh, I love your jaw. I had a very androgynous look, but that was very hot. That was very in. Remember, like Ruby Rose? Like they loved that look.
Yeah.
And then I also put muscle on very quickly, right? Because I'm my body type, I just put muscle on. I can pack it on really fast. I can also put body fat on really fast too, right? If I don't watch my diet. But I said to my boyfriend though, at the time, I said, if I wear my gym stuff and I'm really like if I do a good workout and I'm just pumped up and I'm walking around, I can get a lot of looks. Like guys will be like, woohoo, like look at her. But I can also get a lot of second looks, like people, and I can get mean comments. Guys like, oh, are you, like, do you think that's a man? But I never got that back in the day before this trans explosion came out, right? Where people were like, this was a thing. And even my friend who is a transsexual said, well, probably because like you just don't know now. Because my boyfriend's like, no, I think you're beautiful. Like I would never ever think you're a man. But people, unfortunately, some of the trans stuff has kind of ruined it for like actual women. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No, it's true. It's true. Because then
so I forget
there's
that rugby player is. She was on Sports Illustrated. She's broad and she's super thick, and she gets called a man all the time. But I think she's really beautiful. But I can see how she's got more of like a, I wouldn't even say a manly body, but I mean she's thicker. But and it's mean that people do that, right? But it's just like whatever. Like it doesn't bother me at all. But I don't. And that's why, it's going back to that legislation that Daniel Smith is putting through. I can see maybe trans activists trying to kind of shut it down by doing that, like calling out girls that maybe have a shorter haircut just to kind of
you said that.
ruin stuff, right? But I mean, I'm sure, I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to go. Honestly, I just feel like if they just did like a female only category and whatever, a straight up male category or open, it would be a lot better. But going back to what I was saying with the legislation, it's a step forward with the Alberta legislation. And I surely hope that Pierre or whoever comes in power, I think what you just read with Donald Trump's thing, I just, right now Canada is such a huge mess.
Yeah.
Especially with, Bill C-16. Like when you read that, what Donald Trump's doing and compare it to Bill C-16, oh my God, it's just day and night, like day and night.
Yeah.
So I just, so we really do need a huge change in that regard. Like we really need to start protecting women's spaces, because to allow men to come into a woman's washroom, and I forget what the ratio was, it was 80% of women by the age of like 15 have been somehow, I mean, you would know maybe the stats more than I do, have been sexually assaulted some way, somehow, like, and then forcing us to share our private, like our spaces with them. It's just,
Yeah, the stats is by the time they hit 18, 1 in 4 women will have been sexually abused. Doesn't mean sexual harassment, or that's not in the stat, it's just sexually abused. And and like I know the stats a bit more and the risk a bit more because of the work I used to do. Like I'm a ex-police officer trained to profile sex offenders. I know how they work, and they're celebrating right now because they have easier access than they've never had before. And all it takes is saying, "Oh, I'm a woman," and now you have them in the prisons. And that's like a big one right now because a lot of sex offenders are in prison, and now you have them having access to vulnerable people, like, and you have the prisons that also have their children have access to the mom. So I don't know if you've been reading the Conservative Party. I think Michelle Ferrari has been talking about that a lot. Now in Saskatchewan, we recently had a controversy that came out during the election. There was a school where two twin born as boys, born as males, were using the female washroom, and the girls were feeling uncomfortable, went to the school, the parents went to the school, and they basically said, deal with it. If you don't like it, you girls can use the gender neutral, or like the other washroom that they have. And I remember at the time, Scott Moe's government said, well, we're going to leave it to the school board to deal with. We're not going to pass legislation on that. Although they did move on the parental rights stuff, this is an avenue where they've been too afraid to do. And they haven't officially made it. They haven't yet made it official that how they're going to deal with it. But a birdie is telling me that it's going to be permanently moved to the school board to deal with. Now, we were heavily involved with encouraging people to run for school board last fall election. Do you know, like as an organization, if we're going to lobby for changes, do you know if there is policy already that we could try to put pressure onto the school boards to implement a policy that's fair for women? Like, have you worked with people who have written that? And if so, would you be willing to share that with me? Because I feel like this is probably going to be a battle we're going to be facing in the next couple of weeks or months.
I don't, because that's not an area. Although it's funny, I do know. I know the education minister in Ontario, Joe Dunlop. But I don't know. I haven't had any experience in that area. Because I've just been so focused on like the sports that I've been, and it's funny. Even my father today is. I don't know. I don't think my father's a big Trump fan, but he's always telling me like, just stay focused on your sports. That's it. Don't kind of bleed out into other areas, right? Because I'm like, well, I'm really passionate about women's spaces, right? Like that's just, and you can't just stick with sports, right? But I think he's just worried about me. Like, I don't know. He thinks that if I support Trump, that he thinks that Pierre will lose votes or somehow. I don't know, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But no, I'm sorry, I can't help you in that area. But I mean, if I do, I'm part of. I just joined a group. I don't know if you've heard of CASBAR, but it's a women's group that we're really trying to put pressure on the federal government to basically protect women's rights. So I'm again focusing on the sports area, but there's wings of it that we protect. Obviously, we have 7 issues we want to protect, like women's prisons, obviously the puberty blockers, and all the different sectors. So obviously, indoctrination is one of them as well. So, but
maybe
no,
see if they do have something already done, because we were talking about that as an organization on a campaign effort to kind of put pressure to bring in that change. But we've like in Saskatchewan, we've had so many issues as well. Like in Saskatoon a few years ago, there was like a full intact male that was going into the women's bathroom at like a pool, like a public pool area, but it's also attached to a school. And some women complained, and they basically said, no, he has the right to be there. Has the right to do that. And it even made it to the city level. There were people complaining at the city level, but they basically have allowed it to continue. And there's nothing that's been done. I'm just wondering if right now, with the momentum of everything, it might be a good opportunity to start pushing back even more on all of this. But like I said, there is such a thing as a sex offender profile that will abuse this opportunity. And like the same way, like you'll have someone who will expose themselves in a park. Now they can expose themselves in a woman's locker room or women's spaces, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. Like, I find that so shocking to me. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years and how much it's going to affect Canada. But if you could connect me with that group to get any resources to be able to push back on that.
Yeah, and I'll also connect you with my friend. She actually reached out to me. I did a little video. Have you heard of Regina? It's like a Christian. It's called RCAA.
Yeah, Arcan. Yeah.
I did a video for them because they had an election not too long ago.
Yeah.
And I actually did a little reel for them to make sure they got out and vote for counselors, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I actually worked with them. So let me talk to them as well. And then I'll also talk to CASBAR.
I am connected with Arcan. So I actually met with them last week. Yeah. To kind of strategize for 20. But more importantly is the material. If we're going to put in policies, what would that policy look like? And what I'm going to do too, I'm going to see what exactly Alberta passed and maybe try to grab onto that and push that.
Okay. So, because Alberta, they passed 3 bills in November.
Okay.
So it was Bill 29. I can send you a synopsis of the bills, of a little breakdown. And they passed
now I don't know if I have the numbers correct, but Bill 27 they also did, which was the education bill, which was basically that's obviously any sexual materials that would be in school, kids, like parents, would basically be able to opt
Have
out of
to.
that.
Yeah.
So almost like a letter would go home and basically your parents would sign and say, nope, I do not want this taught to my kids. And you can opt out. Also, teachers cannot be using pronouns without parents' consent.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they also obviously banned puberty blockers for anyone under 16 and any surgeries for under 18. That was
Okay.
a separate bill. That was the medical bill. So.
Yeah, like it was more importantly the sports one. Like we got the parental rights, so a lot of that legislation passed in Saskatchewan. So a lot of that was included, but not specifically the hormone blockers. They stayed away from that. But at the time, Alberta hadn't passed theirs, so they've been avoiding it with the 10-foot pole. I think is that the expression? So, but then with the gender stuff in the bathrooms was a recent contention. And the more interesting thing, which I don't think the general public got the information in time when it came to election, but that particular issue was even more political because it was the children of one of the MLAs who was running in Regina that was the subject of that controversy. So this MLA has two children, biological male who identify as female and
Yeah, I
have
saw
done so for a while. So it made it a bit more contentious as well. But it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to release for policy, if they're going to be dealing with it or if they're just going to be passing the buck. And I want to give Danielle Smith kudos because she's been leading the way in this Canada. And even her policies that she's passed have led the way even ahead of some of the stuff we were seeing in the US and many of the states. So but yeah, do you have any like final words that you as things we should be getting involved with, or maybe some plugs you want to give for the listeners that are watching right now as to what can we do? We often talk about the problem, but I'm one of those I want to figure out how do we fix it. So do you have any advice for the listeners?
Well, it's funny because throughout my fight, I've actually learned like a lot just throughout the whole 3 years. I was just telling people that I've opened up my eyes through all the different areas, and even when I was at the legislation, and obviously met Danielle Smith a couple times, and and she said, "Oh, April, like, what do you want to see in this bill? Like, how has this affected you, and what would you like to see happen?" And she really is such a gracious woman, and actually took the time. Whenever you meet her, she's not about herself. She sits there and asks you all about yourself and what you want. And man, I love her. But when I was at the legislation, I actually people see my posts and people obviously judge, they could judge me or just my posts and stuff, this and that. And but when I was at the legislation, I'll just tell this story because I don't know, I like the story myself, but I met this, I guess, a trans advocate by the name of Blaine. And I knew Blaine was a male, but dressed up as a female. And Blaine was there actually to speak with myself and was there to advocate for this bill, Bill 29, and all the bills actually. And I also have a friend named Kelly who was actually a detransitioner, and met her through this journey as well. And she was there to speak about the harms of puberty blockers because she attempted to transition. Her story is much like mine. She is a recovering alcoholic. Was sexually abused as a child, much like me. And then she actually wanted to transition and she took the puberty blockers and she made a huge mistake and they damaged her body. So very grateful to have met her and heard her story. But when I was there, I heard Blaine speak, and Blaine said, men should not be in women's sports. And I was like, wow, like this trans identifying individuals on our side. And you know what? All this time I was kind of like, not saying I wasn't saying I was like against transgenders, but I always thought that they were always against, right? So it was a really waking up moment for me. So I actually went up to Blaine, and there was actually another trans identifying individual. And I went up to both of them and I shook their hands and I said, thank you so much for using your voice. I said, I really, on behalf of female athletes, I really, appreciate it. And Blaine says, well, you can go ahead and unblock me now on Twitter. And I said, oh, I said, did we get in a fight on Twitter? And Blaine said, yeah, we got into a fight about women's spaces. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, men should not be in women's spaces. And he's like, well, yeah, that's where we differ. Like, so Blaine thinks that it's okay. Because Blaine actually said to me, Blaine admitted that he's a gay man and he wears a woman's wig and dresses up as a woman. And he said, but I have a mental disorder. He goes, I will never become a woman, but I dress like this in order to help me get through my daily life. So he admitted it. And I said, right on. Like, you know what? He goes, I'm a transsexual. I'm a gay man, but I dress like this to get through my daily life. And I thought, you know what? That's good for me. Like, at least he admits it, right? And that's the same with, I don't know if you've heard of Buck Angel, but Buck Angel is the same way. Buck's born female, but took hormones and now looks like a man. But I always tell Buck, I'm like, Buck, you're a female, you'll never be a man. And he's like, yep, you're right, April. I'll always be a woman. I'll never be a man. But they're also, they say that trans activists hate them because they live in reality, right? And that's like, just for them to say that to me, I was like, wow, you really opened my eyes. But Blaine and I are friends to this day now because, I mean, Blaine stands with us and Blaine lives in reality and Blaine's not like hateful, right? But guess what? Blaine and I will have arguments on the phone because I'm like, Blaine, you should not be in our washrooms. And we'll talk about like, well, how can we deal with it? I'm like, guess what, Blaine? You're just going to have to use the universal washroom. You can't use the female washrooms. And Blaine's like, yeah, I guess that's right. And, we talk about it, but we're still friends. And I think that's what the world needs more of is, being able to talk about things and not hate on each other and like shut each other down because you have a difference of opinion, right? But I am very adamant about obviously men should not be in women's spaces, right? So because obviously, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and it's something that I've talked about on the show too. I don't know. Do you know who Blair White is?
Yeah, Blair White.
Yeah. So Blair White is a trans woman, so biological male who is now dressing as a female. But I will say Blair can pass as a female. Like I think unless you know that she's trans, but she did a video once and it was a bit eye-opening because sometimes we don't get the perspective too. We get so set in our own views. But I remember, so I'm just confessing to you, I'm a bit torn with this too because Blair did a video and she was going into the male's washroom and she showed the reaction of her going in the male's washroom and she said it was so embarrassing. She even got kicked out of a restaurant. So I think yes, I agree there should be a limit, but at the same time I see people like Blair where if they were to go in the male's washroom they would be treated differently. But it just goes to show Blair has done everything to fully transition that's why you can almost not tell. So I feel for people like Blair as well, and I think we need to consider that because some will fully pass, but I will also say women don't feel in danger around someone like Blair. So there is like a fine line, and I don't know what the real answer is, but I don't think people would have issues with Blair just by the simple fact that they would know. So I think we have an instinct, right? That we can understand when somebody is more predatory and someone who's not too. And I think we've been told to ignore that, to shut up and be quiet and stop complaining. But I think deep down we know that there is a problem that's not being addressed. I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I just know that there are certain situations Yeah.
Well, and that's I guess that's the point. I don't know how to articulate it, is that, Blaine's a friend of mine, and I think, some hardcore, like, radical feminists would be like, oh, you can't be friends with him. That's the reason why we're here today, is because of this whole
Mhm.
trans thing. And I was like, no, like, I think that's mean. I think that's being mean. We're
Mhm.
still all human beings.
Yeah.
And I have mental problems. I was sexually
Mhm.
abused, and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have probably issues that, I have, like, when I'm in the washroom or when things happen in my life, things come up for me. And I'm sure that's because of my sexual trauma.
Mhm.
But so when I met Blaine, when we were at this restaurant, there was also a man at the legislation that day that was there. And there was a man with 5 o'clock shadow on his face, hairy arms, wearing a skin tight blue dress. And this man kept saying, no, this was the same day that I met Blaine. Blaine, first of all, wears a blonde wig. He wears heels. He dresses to the nines. He makes a lot of effort to look like a woman.
Mhm.
And I said to Blaine, I would have no idea that you were a woman. I might suspect, but I would never feel threatened in the washroom with Blaine. Not at all. Just like we're talking about Blair White, like, I wouldn't even know. I would not peg him off as a predator or someone dangerous at all.
Mhm.
But this man who sat beside me at the restaurant, who was there, you could tell he had autogynephilia. It was a fetish, because every time he got up from that table, he had big muscular arms and hairy legs. He wasn't hiding his bulge. He said, well, I got to go use the little girl's room. And he would go and make a big scene and would go right to the women's washroom, and he would make sure that we all knew that he was going in there. That's the kind of guy that we have to worry about. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. And there's a difference between him and there's a difference between Blaine. And this is why we fight, is because of people like that. Because
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's people like that that ruin it. And
Mhm.
this is why we need the universal washrooms.
Mhm.
So whatever. And that's what I'm saying. Some people just want to live their life. And yeah, I guess if there's people that just want to live their life and come into the washroom and I don't know about it and you're not a threat, whatever. I guess I just
Mhm.
don't know about it. But unfortunately, there's a lot of predators out there that take advantage of it, and those are the ones that we have to worry about. And in the sports issue, that's just a whole different issue. Men should just not be
Yeah.
in women's
Oh, yeah.
sports. We're all on the
Yeah.
same page, 99%. That's called biology. That's unfair. We're talking about sports. Bodies compete, not identities. That's just a whole other ballgame.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Hitchhiker, one of the comments says, um, too late, but now make all the buildings with individual gender neutral washroom, quit making communal bathrooms. But what I'm wondering is, like, everywhere that has like a sex-based bathroom, there should be a third one. In most places there is. So, but maybe instead put policies to kind of enforce it's the same way, like you have to have access to wheelchair, put policies where there has to be a third bathroom for those who identify as a different sex. That would solve the problem. It would never be an issue for anyone. They'd still have a washroom. But yeah, is there anything else you would like to share before we close here?
I know I kind of rambled on there.
No, that's
So,
okay.
yeah, no, I just want to say to most people, the most important thing that I've learned besides that was that people just please speak up, because that's how things change. If you speak up and you use your voice, because I used my voice, I had the policy changed in my powerlifting federation, like, besides getting suspended, which
Mhm.
I honestly would do all over again because I got global attention. But I had the policy changed, and I was telling you earlier on the phone that I had a lot of little DEI policies changed within my workplace environment, and all these little, like, policies have changed. And I mean, please just use your voice. And if you can't use your voice, if you're too afraid, just get some t-shirts or hoodies, because I honestly, I've never had a negative reaction wearing this. And be bold, be brave, because the new government coming in, it's going to change, and it's just going to back you in your voice. And it's not hateful, telling the truth.
Mhm. Exactly. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to pop you down and then I'm just going to close off the episode, and I'm sure you and I will be in touch soon, and we'll be working together probably in the future. But yeah, I'll let you go now. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Wow. So what an awesome discussion we had. And I think one that we're not having often enough. So if you want to see more content like this, if you want to hear more about what is happening in Canada, around the world, if you want to hear about controversial subject, I highly suggest you follow me. You can do so on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Instagram, TikTok. We still have TikTok in Canada. You can find me by searching Nadine G Ness. Nadine G is in golf, Ness. And we're going to be doing more interviews. We have 2 more scheduled this week on Thursday and Friday. One with Kirk Lubimov, and then on Friday with Sheldon Substack, I call him. I can never say his last name. I'm going to wait till he says it for me on the show, and then I'll know exactly how to pronounce it. But yeah, so if you don't subscribe, click the button wherever it is on the platform. And you can also set notifications so you get notified when we are going live, whether it's by myself or with guests. And I've been starting to post shorter clips of the episode, so you'll probably see some of the short clips of this interview posted on all social media. So if you want other people to hear what you've heard today, also share this. The more it gets shared, the further reach it has, and the more chances we have at influencing change in the right direction. But thank you so much for watching, and have a good afternoon, guys.